go live and then get out of, leave it recording, because otherwise it plays on both my computer and the YouTube in the background, so then you hear it twice.
Oh, wow, okay.
But I'll have the YouTube going momentarily, and then I'll get out of that.
Okay.
Famous last words. It's trying. There we go.
It says for me that it's live already.
Yeah, and now it is.
Oh, okay.
So I'm gonna get out of that. Back here. Okay. Do you see it live on YouTube on the top?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
And when Brian comes on, he'll be on as a panelist or an attendee originally.
He's coming as a panelist because I wasn't quite sure how to do both meetings at one time.
Okay, good.
But do you have a participant screen? If you click on the participants down to the bottom, does it pull up a screen on the side?
Yeah, yep, I can see. I've got all these options that I haven't had before.
Yeah. So in the participants, if you want, if you hover over somebody, you'll get options, and you can move them to be a panelist or back to being an attendee or kick them out of the meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
If I lose more than you, I'll be back.
Okay.
Then go try it should, if you've got all the co-host features or the host features, you should be all set.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Sorry for the confusion on this. I'm still learning.
No problem.
All right.
Hey, Mike.
Josh, how you doing?
Good. How about you?
I'm still doing well. Okay, so those are not lockers behind you, is that correct?
That's correct. This is my editing suite. This is where I edit and color my movies and my photos.
Oh, so you have equipment and gear, tools of the trade stored in there?
Yeah, I've got my monitor speakers. I've got my color accurate monitor, computer, screen,
Huh?
and then I have a few other devices here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really nothing too fancy. It's kind of the bare minimum to get an accurate color and sound, to look at accurate colors and those nuances.
Sure.
But yeah, it having the walls painted, it's called 18% gray, having it a very neutral color, makes it so when you're looking at photos and videos, you're not influenced by the colors of the wall. Because if you have really any color, including white, it'll kind of throw off how your brain, how your eyes perceive colors on the screen. So you just want it as neutral as possible.
Okay.
Hi, George.
Cool. Hey, George.
Hey, Josh. Hey, Mike.
How you holding up?
Just fine, thanks.
So it sounds like you had fun slogging through ordinances recently.
You know, I did that for a certain portion of my life, so it wasn't too bad. It's interesting.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I'm familiar with the wireless communications one because I was on the planning board here in town when there was a cell phone tower application, and we spent a lot of time with that baby. Yeah, and
that's an interesting one. I mean, we can discuss it more when the full group is here. It just has very, very broad language about what's covered by the statute. Mm-hmm. It's any kind of a device that's involved in radio television communication. So.
Good.
These days, that's everything.
Yeah.
Hey, Gina.
Hi there.
Good evening.
Evening.
Gina.
Hey.
And we have a dog too. Cool.
And that's Ivy. She heard you talking.
Brian, I made you a attendee for now, and then I'll
David,
bring you over when we come to your agenda item. Just FYI. Hi, David.
I'm back. Sorry,
David's back.
having a little challenge with the other one.
Oh dear, what's going on with it?
It's moved you over as the host, right?
Yes, I'm now the host. You're now a co-host.
Can you get rid of me?
Yes, I will. Let's see. I can withdraw your co-host permission. Is that?
Yeah. That'll work.
Okay. I think I just did that.
Okay, now I'm gonna try to leave.
For everyone who's watching, we're having two simultaneous Lincolnville committee meetings, both at 7 o'clock. The other one is the Lakes and Ponds committee. So we're trying to figure out how to do this simultaneously. So I'm actually hosting this meeting, my first Zoom hosting responsibility. So hopefully we don't have any issues.
Doing great so far.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, David.
Good evening.
Hey, David.
Oh,
Hi, everybody.
And I'm going to be doing a lot of screen sharing in this meeting. So it's very exciting to bring that technology to this.
I appreciate that. I was just moving everything to another screen so I could see it.
I'm moving around my windows too.
Hey guys,
Hey, Jordan.
how's it going?
Good. New scenery for you.
Yeah, it's like really hot in the studio right now, so I need a break.
Is the studio attached to the house, or is it a?
It's separate, so it's like a two-story barn with the bottom studio space, and then up top there's like some polishing rooms and storage and stuff. But
Oh, nice.
yeah,
So before we start, Jordan, I understand you do some engraving on metal.
I do. Yeah, I do.
Well, I have a hand plane, which I might want to have you take a look at, see if you could put something in it on just easily on the sole.
Yeah, for sure. That's actually a really common one. That and you'd be surprised. Tattoo artists' guns a lot of time have really ornate scrolling done on like same thing with wood planer. So like on the side you've got that really nice shape, and so that becomes like a whole template where you have a design that goes in there, or just
Good, yeah.
simply engraving words. But yeah,
So I might swing that by your place.
yeah. Give me shoot me an email and we'll go through it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Jonathan.
Jonathan.
Hi.
Hey
Hi,
there.
Jonathan.
Hey.
Okay, let's wait just one more minute. Getting myself organized too. All right, well, it's 7:01, so I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to start with the with public comment. Let's see. I don't have anything from the public. The only other attendee is going to be our number 4 agenda item. Did all of you get my updated agenda? I just sent it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, well, let's move to the approval of the minutes.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, moved by George, seconded by Jordan. Is there any discussion about the minutes? All right, I'll call a vote. Mike, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, George, how do you vote?
Yes.
Gina, how do you vote?
Yes.
David, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jordan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Jonathan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes, so that is unanimous. Okay, so let's move on to number 4, discussion with Brian Hippold of Casco Bay Advisors. I'm going to bring him over now as a panelist.
Hello, Brian.
Howdy.
Brian, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How's everyone doing there?
Great. Thank you for coming.
Great.
Coming.
You want to start by just telling us a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm an independent consultant who spends most of his time assisting municipalities understand where they're at in terms of broadband coverage, what their assets and technologies are, where their gaps are, and how to fill those gaps. So I principally I'm an advocate for municipalities in terms of negotiating with service providers, seeking grant funding to help fill gaps in coverage, and advising broadband committees on how to move their vision and goals forward. I've spent my entire career in telecom and broadband, working for ISPs, cable companies, independent local exchange carriers. I came to Maine in 2007 as part of the Fairpoint acquisition of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine from Verizon, and initially built their sales organization, and then eventually took over their network planning and engineering. Left there in 2010 to go to the West Coast for a couple of years. And then since 2012, I've been back in Maine consulting, primarily across northern New England, Massachusetts, and for the last few years been pretty much solely devoted in the state of Maine, working with county governments, municipalities, do a little bit of planning, strategic planning for ISPs, do a lot of work with the Connect Maine Authority, and so forth. So I've spent half of my career in engineering and operations, and the other half in sales leadership, general management, and planning. So fairly well-rounded background, and really, focused on helping communities. Maine has a lot of unserved or underserved areas, and working with communities to help solve that broadband gap. So that's my background. What else can I help you understand?
Great. Why don't we open it up for questions from the committee?
And I have a question. Are you familiar with Lincolnville situation at all?
I am, to the extent that I have had discussions with Lincolnville Telephone to understand a little bit about what their service coverage is. I've looked at the Connect Maine mapping information, which we all know is not accurate, but nonetheless, it's what's available out there. In Lincolnville, you, as I understand it, you have two providers from a telephone perspective. Lincolnville Telecom and CCI, Consolidated Communications, serves just the Route 1 corridor from the south up to the beach. And that's really the extent of what I know about Lincolnville. You have some cable TV coverage through Lincolnville, but beyond that, I'm not really aware of. I really haven't dug into what assets you have whatever the challenges that you have and so forth. So I'm geographically familiar with the town. I've been on the lake with my boat, and I've spent a lot of time getting on the ferry going over to Islesboro. So
That kind of leads into my question. We're looking for help considering a public option, more like Islesboro has done, or trying to work more effectively with the current providers that we have. Have you helped towns, deal with those options, and particularly the possibility of owning our own system?
certainly. So I was the owner's project manager for Islesboro and their fiber build. So I represented the town, excuse me, through the construction process, a little bit of the re-engineering and subscriber turn-up process. I'm working with the town of Swans Island and have been for a couple of years now, helping their broadband committee develop their vision and goals. I engineered a fiber to the home network there, and we're in the process of getting ready to go out to an RFP for construction. I'm engineering fiber to the home networks in Millinocket, East Millinocket, and Medway, and am working with all of Franklin County. We've broken it up into various zones where the strategy there is to develop public-private partnerships with service providers to fill the gaps. There's also a group that's known as the West Kennebec Lakes Community Broadband Association. It's a long name, made up of the towns of Fayette, Leeds, Mount Vernon, Reedfield, Vienna, Wayne, working with the town of Litchfield. But also I've done work for Cumberland County, helping them assess and figure out what they need to do for some of their gaps, especially in the island communities and the lakes area, and also working on a project in Kennebec. So it really goes from far northern Maine into the very, very rural areas to the more populous areas of the state.
Any other questions?
Yes. Have you also advised municipalities in terms of the renegotiation of their franchises?
Yes. I can't remember how many different, 20 or 30 different municipalities that I've been involved in helping to renegotiate their franchise agreements. It's not an easy process. If you look across the state of Maine, there's, I believe, over 200 municipalities that have expired franchise agreements, and the existing providers are not necessarily enamored with renewing those. So they continue on a month-to-month basis, even though they're expired. So that it really all comes back to what is your vision and goals that you're trying to accomplish for your community, and then developing a strategy on how best to develop a strategy around those visions and goals. So
just another follow-up question in terms of that. Have you worked on overbuilds?
Yeah, in the case of Millinocket, East Millinocket, and Medway, they're each served by a cable provider, either Charter Spectrum or Beeline cable up there. And those communities are pretty well served, but the constituents aren't happy with the providers. So that's an overbuild situation. you know, Islesboro and Swans Island are just simply an overbuild over the incumbent phone company that's providing DSL service. And in Kennebec, for instance, they're, you know, probably 98% served by the cable company. I recently completed a study for Booth Bay and Booth Bay Harbor, and they're very, very well covered with cable TV, but nonetheless, they're looking for an alternative solution. They'd like to see competition, like the reliability of the service that's available to be improved, and the capability to be improved. So,
in your experience, which obviously broad, is there an appetite from potential overbuilders in a situation in which you have partial fiber already delivered into a community?
Generally, ISPs are reluctant to overbuild a cable TV system because the nature of a cable TV system, they're all a hybrid fiber coax system now. So it's fiber going out to a node, and then they split off onto the coax.
Okay.
And that architecture, if it is properly engineered and properly managed, can be a formidable competitor to a fiber to the home system in terms of capability.
Right, it's fiber to the node, basically, right?
Yeah, those are really fiber to the node. Although over time, they continue to push the fiber further out towards the subscribers as demand dictates. So it really comes down to what is the business case and what is the return on investment. All of these providers are for-profit companies, and they each have their own agenda. They're all similar, but they're different. And they all have different investment criteria. So if you're looking to overbuild, then it's a function of how much is the local community willing to contribute to the capital costs? How willing are the subscribers to pre-subscribe for service over a period of time? And there's a handful of different levers that impact the return on investment for a provider. So, and what's the availability of grant funding to assist with the process? So if you look at the Connect Maine Authority, they'll fund or help fund overbuilds for areas where the existing service is less than 25 megabit down and 3 megabit up. The USDA, it's 10 megabit down and 1 megabit up. So, from what I can see thus far for Lincolnville, and we don't have a really good picture of the current assets and capability on the ground, but there would be limited funding available from the grant organizations. But I say that without having done a study and really understand what's available. And I should probably go over a little bit of sort of the foundation that we build is, the first thing we do is reach out to the existing providers and ask them to provide all of their mapping data. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. For instance, Lincolnville Telecom, they'll provide their data because they're a little bit more progressive. But if you have areas served by Charter Spectrum, the best I'll get is an 8.5 by 11 inch PDF that doesn't really give the detail, and it's not necessarily accurate. Consolidated Communications will provide information, but only under a strict NDA that really restricts the use of the data. So What we do is we go out and drive every roadway, every long driveway. We identify the infrastructure, we document it, we input it into a GIS system. We count the number of potential subscribers, which is a key metric for any service provider in terms of an investment. And we build all of the data and build a model for that community that shows exactly what do you have in terms of fiber capability or a hybrid fiber coax capability in terms of the cable company. And to the extent that the provider will provide information related to their DSL capability, we'll include that. But we find that most communities really, at the end of the day, aren't really interested in DSL as a long-term solution. So we map all of that, and then we're able to determine what would the costs be to extend the cable TV infrastructure, and based on past projects, project how much of that cost would be borne by the cable provider and how much would the local community need to contribute. And then we'll also look at community-wide, what would the high-level cost be to deploy your own fiber to the home system, sort of like an Islesboro. And then build the financial operating pro forma to see, is that sustainable? Look at the sensitivities in terms of subscriber take rate, pricing for service, and so forth. Islesboro, they had a very, very unique model, and they were uniquely situated in that there was no cable system. There was only DSL service available. The DSL service was not very good. There was many areas of the island that were unserved, and the phone company really didn't want to be there to begin with because it wasn't economic for them. They lost money. So on Islesboro, the select board said, look, if we're going to do this, then this has to be affordable to all constituents, regardless of income level. So they set the price at $30 a month, or actually they set it at $360 a year. And if you wanted service, you had to buy it by the year. They send one bill a year, which lowers their administrative costs. And they paid for it with tax dollars. And not only that, they're subsidizing the ongoing operation with tax dollars. So it's actually, my background coming from the industry, it was a little bit foreign, and it took a little while for me to wrap my head around it. But they don't need to make money. They just need to get as close as they can to break even. And if it requires some subsidy, like they do for roads and other things, then they were willing to do that. So again, it comes back to, what is your vision? What are your goals? What's the appetite for funding? And I know that in the case of Lincolnville, they have an interest in completely building out your community with fiber to the home. They're just trying to figure out, how do we turn this into an economic business case that meets their investment criteria? So that's probably far longer answer to your question than you anticipated.
No, that's extremely helpful. If you don't mind, another question or two.
Oh, that's fine.
In terms of you describe, I think, a very thoroughgoing bottom-up process of analysis. Is that a year? Is that 18 months? Is that 2 years?
Oh, no, that's, you're looking at a 3 to a maximum of 6 months. And depending on workload, it could be sooner, you know, and I use some subcontractors to go out and drive all the roads. Sometimes I do it myself, but normally I subcontract that. So depending on their availability and so forth. So it's just there's no rocket science here. It's a matter of knowing what you're looking at, documenting it, integrating it into a GIS that you can use then to create the metrics to feed into the business models and so forth. And you know, that's a 3 to 6 month time frame. And then typically what we do as the next stage is we'll share that with all of the potential service providers that are doing business here in Maine. And there are 8 or 9 of them. And that includes the cable company, the phone companies, all of the ISPs. I'll take the final report, share that with them, walk them through it. And that report includes all the metrics that allow them to easily input it into their investment models. And and also it depends on what they're doing in the area. Is there an adjacent community that they're already working in? That changes their model, you know, it makes it maybe more attractive. And again, every service provider has their own agenda and their own growth plan and so forth. So it's just working through all of that detail.
Well, thank you. That's very interesting. You know, it does strike me that the analysis that you're talking about would really be a predicate to deciding what our vision is in some ways. I mean, I certainly don't speak for the committee, but I think that, you know, what we've heard is that we have, you know, a mix of fiber and DSL. We have an incumbent provider that no one likes. And we're trying to get a sense of what's the most direct or perhaps in the end, the most productive, you know, step forward, whether it's, you know, finding this, you know, dirty pictures of the management of LTI to renegotiate it, or to find, you know, I guess to sound out overbuilders, which I guess doing that analysis you're talking about would be you'd have to have that in hand to be able to go out to them, I take it. And then, you know, because the other thing that we've been talking about with a lot of interest is the Islesboro model, which I guess really requires the same fundamental analysis in terms of how much the town wants to spend and be exposed to in terms of doing their own system. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you need to build a solid foundation of information, and if a lot of communities will become enamored with a certain solution prematurely, and by doing that, then they're not considering all of the other potential opportunities. You know, I could sit here and predict probably with a fair degree of accuracy who would really be interested and who wouldn't, but I'm always surprised as well as to someone who may show interest. And when it comes to your vision and goals, you're absolutely right. But it's really a two-step process. What are you trying to accomplish right now? What is your vision and goals right now? And then once you have the benefit of that study, you revisit the vision and goals as to what it is, how might that have changed? And then once you have that nailed down, then you start engaging the community and educating the community about broadband, what it is, the different technologies, and what their real options might be, and building that community support for however you might go about implementing the solution. And when I talk about community support, I'm talking about their willingness to fund a portion or all of it, in the case of Islesboro, or their willingness to subscribe to an alternative service. And the one thing, everybody wants fiber. Everyone wants symmetrical gigabit service. I call it fiber envy. But the reality is that they all vote with their wallet. And nobody needs a gigabit symmetrical service. They only need something far less right now anyways. If you look at Islesboro, they offer gigabit service symmetrical to all subscribers. They have over 700 subscribers out there, yet the backhaul coming off the island is about 3 gigabit at its maximum. Because not everybody is online at the same time or requesting data at the same time. Most of them aren't really using the capability that they have. As an example, I did due diligence on a fiber to the home system in Burlington, Vermont, that was owned by the municipality. You could Google it, and there's all kinds of horrid stories about they lost $17 million along the way, and it was a mess. But nonetheless, it's now, they have over 40% market share. It's a very, very profitable business. It's throwing off cash. But when I did the analysis, the due diligence, this was about 3 years ago now, over half of their subscribers were buying the 5 megabit package. Even though they could have got a gigabit, they were buying the 5 megabit because it was actually sufficient for their needs and it was the lowest cost. So there really is a disconnect between what people want and think they need versus what they really need if the system is properly engineered and properly managed. And that's probably some of the challenges you're running into, where these networks aren't being properly engineered and managed, because the providers don't have the competitive threat, and they're looking to maximize the investment. And I'm not, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not denigrating the providers. They're doing what their investors are demanding of them.
Well, could I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
Sorry, and I'm going to try and keep my volume regular because my connection is so bad that I come off sounding, there's a lag and it's very loud. But I was curious that in any of your negotiations in all this time, if after doing the survey of a municipality, that if there was any positive benefit towards the municipality after a renegotiation. You know, like for example, if you showed that there was a large number of prospective subscribers, or anything that would look like that maybe would be to the advantage of the town, do those negotiations ever lead to anything such as maybe better performance or enhanced service of any kind, or is it just the status quo?
Well, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if a community is organizing themselves and putting together a plan to go off in their own direction, many times the incumbent provider will step up their game as a defensive measure.
Well, that's what I was wondering because sorry.
Yeah, but most often it what they do doesn't achieve 100% of what your goals are. It just makes it maybe more difficult for you to implement your ultimate solution. So there's a mixed bag. Sorry. So you just don't know. So in your case, it's Lincolnville that provides both the cable TV and the phone service?
Yeah,
Yes.
they basically provide everything. I was wondering, my understanding is they, according to the company, there is 75% of Lincolnville residents have access to fiber optic through them. We don't necessarily know if that's true, but let's just say hypothetically that is true. Have you worked with communities that have that kind of fiber optic penetration who still pursued municipal fiber either successfully or unsuccessfully?
No, is the short answer. The reason I was hesitating is I really need to understand what they mean by having access to fiber.
Well, this is part of the large problem, is that they've given us many different figures, and when we've looked over them, not only anecdotal evidence points to the opposite of what they're telling us, but also it just, if our town was covered to 75% with fiber, I wouldn't be on this committee right now, to be honest with you. But 75% is a large saturated portion of a market. And it seems like that the coverage is more like 35% to 40% realistically. So that's part of the larger problem here, is that we can't get a straight answer, because I believe that at the same time that they want to say that they have 75% covered, when they're applying for grants, it's to their advantage to show that a community is also underserved. So I feel like there's a strange dichotomy going on where both of those things are existing at the same time.
Yes, and again, that's why you need to have that solid information, that solid foundation of data to see through all that. And one complicating factor, regardless of the provider, is everyone has a metric that they use that says if you're within X number of feet of the roadway, you can get connected. But if you're down a long driveway, you have to pay an extra installation fee or an aid to construction or what have you. And that's a real expense, a real cost for them to deploy that infrastructure, whether it's via cable or fiber. And a lot of constituents don't fully appreciate the economics behind that. So if it could very well be that Lincolnville covers 75% with fiber, but there's a lot of constituents who aren't subscribing because of that that large installation fee. I'm sorry.
Well,
I think,
sorry, George, go ahead.
no, I'm just saying that's certainly the experience that drove me to this committee. And it was sort of the astonishing amount to run the fiber down the road.
If you can even get that option, which a lot of us, even when we come to them with multiple people on our road or all the people on our road offering to pay, they don't even give us the option or a figure of expanding it. Even when we meet their criteria of aerial poles, 4+ houses, etc. So, I would pay to get it to my house, but I can't. So, it's just actually not physically possible unless I searched for a subcontractor myself privately. I don't even know how that would work, but
No, it wouldn't. They wouldn't accept that.
Exactly.
They wouldn't.
Well, just maybe a follow-up question to Josh's, in terms of, the percentage of fiber to the home that, would make municipal service sensible. Is there a similar percentage with regard to an overbuild?
It really comes down to take rate. So in an overbuild, you're overbuilding a competitor, and your constituents are going to vote with their wallet. So it's that much more difficult to create an economic business case.
Yeah.
So how dissatisfied are your subscribers with the current level of service? And you won't know for sure until you actually offer that alternative. And then that's sort of a build it and they will come scenario. And that's not always sustainable.
Well, and it's also not we're not paying bargain basement prices. We're required to have phone service with internet, and the lowest you could pay is $100 a month. And I've lived, around the country and world, and it's not uncommon to have. I mean, we get 5 to 8 megabits per second here, and in most other places, I've gotten 20 to 50 for $40 to $60 a month. So we're definitely paying a premium price for a product that is not premium. So I feel like anything in comparison to that, even if I paid $120 a month to have 25 megabits per second, that would be amazing.
And again, there's a lot of different levers here. So when you're making that comparison to other areas of the country or other areas of the world, what is the population density in those communities compared to where you're at? So it really, in order to be economic for a for-profit company, they need to have 15 to 20 potential subscribers per mile. And it's very likely that you don't reach that threshold. But if you're living in Singapore, that city's vertical. If you're living in Boston, it's very, very dense. Even Burlington, Vermont is much more dense or Portland, Maine, than what you're talking about. So it's
Minturn, Colorado. I think there was like 120 people who lived there.
Well, but to what extent did Minturn, Colorado take advantage of the Obama BTOP funding program to roll out broadband? I mean, so from the investment standpoint, did they have access to capital that they didn't have to pay back? And
that was 10 years ago now, so I can't remember. But I just mean as far as the affordability, I think that, like I said, paying $100 a month for internet, I don't feel like anywhere right now that's a cheap price.
No.
Ryan, could you talk a little bit about budget? So if we worked with someone like you, because it sounds very helpful to have the data and then to understand your options and then to either negotiate with an overbuild or LCI or do our own system. Could you walk us through a little bit about the different phases of using someone like you and how you charge and what we should be thinking about for costs to come up with money to hire that service if that's what the town decides?
Typically, what I'll do is I'll come with a fixed cost to perform the study. And I need to do a little bit of more research into your community and what it would take in terms of level of effort. But generally, that study, if it's a single town, will be about $15,000. If you partner with some adjacent towns, then the per town price comes down because it's one level of effort. It's one report. There's some economy of scale that can be employed. So does
that include doing what you're doing somewhat with us tonight, the consulting part of it as well? When you get the study, do you all? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll participate in your broadband committee meetings and, help you if there's some gaps on your committee, help you understand that, talk about funding and so forth. But once the study is complete, then I'll typically convert to a time and expense, where we're introducing the study to the providers, helping them understand the opportunity, helping them put together or solicit proposals and go through that dialogue. And that portion is incredibly difficult to predict what the level of effort is.
Right.
Um,
So that's why I convert to on an hourly basis.
And we've seen that the Island Institute gives grants of up to 15,000. Have you been funded through Island Institute?
I have for Swans Island has had a couple of Island Institute grants. Have had quite a few through the Connect Maine Authority and the Maine Community Foundation. And there's other sources that are becoming available through the EDA and so forth. But one thing I do ask my clients is, you need to come up with 50% of this from local funds and seek the remainder, if any, from the granting authorities. And that may sound odd, but that's sort of my model in that it ensures the engagement of the local community. You should have skin in the game. And it's easier to acquire those grants if the local community is also participating. So typically I recommend 50% from the local community, get 50% from the granting authorities. And in the case of Swans Island, we're now on our third planning grant. And largely because of that they seek local donations, they seek town funding, Island Institute funding, Connect Maine funding, Maine Community Foundation. So they're leveraging their investment. And that's one way you can go about helping to fund that effort. At the end of the day, it's not that much money. Some communities just fund it out of their coffers. The town of Minot, they're funding everything themselves, and they're not really a affluent community. Yet they're committed, and they've set aside funds to go ahead. It's that important to them. Booth Bay Harbor funded it themselves. Southport is going for an Island Institute grant and 50% funding from themselves. So it's a mix, but these grant applications I assist with, they're relatively straightforward. It's certainly doable.
Do we have any remaining questions for Brian?
Well, yeah. Brian, I'm wondering if you have a package that you can send to us with a lot of the information you've gone over now, mostly what services you would provide in that $15,000 package, as it were.
Yeah, I can put together a proposal for you that will outline the scope of work and what the deliverables would be, and the process to getting there. So
Great.
That would be a good thing to have. Thanks.
yeah, happy to do it.
Okay, great. Anything else?
Immensely helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian.
Not a problem.
Thanks.
Reach
Really
out at
appreciate
any
it,
time
Brian.
if you have additional questions.
Thank you.
Have a good
summer.
night.
It sounds
too.
good. Thank you so much.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Just good.
Okay. Well, that was a lot of great information for us.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on to number 5, discussion of Alan Henze update from LCI. Alan emailed David Kinney. We had requested the addresses of the places in Lincolnville that are served with fiber optic that have fiber optic, that have access but have not applied, and who do not have access. So I'm just, you know what? I am gonna share my screen so you can just see it directly. There you go.
Dazzling.
Excellent. Wow.
So yeah, Alan says he's going to supply these addresses to us, which is very exciting, and then we can cross-reference that with the information that we gather from the survey, and I mean, hopefully things match up, but we'll be able to have those dual streams of data. And then on the bottom, he says, FYI, I've been given the green light to begin a new marketing campaign to all Lincolnville on-net addresses that have not yet applied for fiber, including all current Lincolnville DSL customers who can access our fiber now. It should begin in about a week. As you know, we upgraded the Lincolnville CO equipment, upgrades to our electronics, plus added significantly more ports to allow for this expansion of fiber service to our DSL customers who are on net now. In the past 6 months, we have extended fiber access to about 50 more addresses: Norton Pond Road, Poland Road, Wiley Neck, and soon to Springbrook. So I just thought I would share that with you. Hopefully that is forthcoming from them. Okay, so number 6 on the agenda, discussion about preliminary report presentation to the Board of Selectmen. I attended the Board of Selectmen meeting last night and gave them a presentation, just basically going over what we've been up to. So they were pleased with our progress so far. I guess I cover a few of these in additional agenda items, but they had concerns about private fundraising that the town would then use as a matching grant. And the biggest thing is the survey, they were concerned about including a question there about municipal fiber, feeling like it was kind of, even mentioning it kind of leads people to maybe assume that the Board of Selectmen is supporting municipal fiber, and felt like this first initial survey, we should instead just ask what people think of their service, what they have for service, you know, all the questions that we have on there, but to not include a question about municipal fiber.
Josh,
Well-
could you explain, before we get off of that, could you talk a little bit more about that? So is there, and I didn't see what happened last night, is there a lot of reservations about considering the public option? And is that where that's coming from? Or,
Yes.
'cause it strikes me as odd to not ask people kind of what their thoughts are.
Well,
Yeah.
Can
Jordan,
I-
go ahead.
sorry, I watched the meeting last night, and actually, I think you all might be surprised because oftentimes I'm maybe the most outspoken here. But between the presentation that we just had and listening to the selectmen last night, I believe it was not so much reservation as they wanted to approach this perhaps more incrementally. And I know the suggestion had been made to maybe pare down the survey and first find out the basic opinion of the town, not about municipal or broadband internet, but just, you know, what's important to you for service? You know what I mean? What do you have for service? So just like a basic temperature. So I didn't get the feeling so much. I mean, there was a little bit of, you know, it's a shock to everyone thinking about municipal, but I felt it was more about just finding out what the town really wants, you know, as a collective. Like, what do we want? Is internet service important to us? And maybe I understood that wrong, Josh, but that's how I interpreted it. And I think that it's a good place to start with, especially after hearing about, you know, the assessment that can be done and the information that can be garnered for what is a relatively small amount of money in $15,000. And if we find out, coupled with that, what the town's appetite for internet period is, I think that would be a great jumping off point. So sorry.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I agree with them. I don't think this first survey should include talking about municipal broadband, because we just want to ask the basic question of, what do you think of your service? What do you want? What do you need? And I think from that, we can expand. Mike, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I watched. I was watching last night as well, and yeah, I agree with both of what you said about the need to it to be a level 1 inquiry, as it were, the survey. However, the select board, while they said, or some of them said, there ought not to be a question about municipal broadband. We shouldn't. Don't bother survey people with that option, more or less. But they also then said, why don't you ask them a question about how would you like to work with Lincolnville Telephone Company along their lines, and which is an option. And so you either don't do options or you do options. And I think we should probably deep six that last request that they made to ask people, would you like to work with Lincolnville Telephone Company in a Connect Main grant? Or include a municipal or question about municipal options, which I don't think we should do either myself. So I like the idea of, like I said, a level 1 field temperature inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Did you hear them ask that, Jordan?
I didn't hear that so much. I did hear their concern about having the appearance of there being an agenda from either one or both of the select board and the committee. But I mean, just again to reiterate, because it's one thing when you read it on paper, but then when you hear it read out or you go through it, the survey was longer than when I had first read it. It just was. And I feel like too, inundating people with too many questions of different parts of information, if that makes sense, it will dilute our results. And like Josh said, it just really is important to get them thinking about what their everyday use is of internet, how important that is to them, and how important that's going to be moving into the future. Because if any of those are, I mean, as we all know, because we rely on the internet, then there's going to be a palette for moving forward in some way. And then if we have that information, which is irrefutable when he does the technical survey of the town, then we'll really know what's going on. And I'm personally very curious, irregardless of the provider. I just would really like to know what the actual situation in the town is.
And yeah, and so would I. I was just pointing out there was an inconsistency in what the Board of Selectmen were asking us to do with this survey.
I was listening last night too, and I wasn't sure quite what their take was either. So, but I think also we need to consider most people don't have a broad education about fiber and broadband in general. So
let me just ask a different question about the survey. Based upon what we just heard from Brian, he did speak about the need to have a survey. Ought we to speak with him about survey models that he's used before we finalize this?
The problem, the problem, okay, here's the problem. So survey's free, and we're not gonna be able to hire him. I mean, before we do a survey, the board, in terms of hiring anyone, well, at least in the board's view, they don't know. I'm going to urge them to watch the presentation that Brian gave. I think that would be very helpful to them. But
no, I was just thinking that, he might be able to give us a freebie to take a look at, because what he seemed to say that if we did engage him, one of the things that he would be doing would be the survey. Right.
Before we jump into the survey discussion, could we go thoroughly through what the selectmen talked about last night? I mean, I don't want to I really want to understand what they're thinking.
Well, it wasn't that. Well, I mean, it really. It's. I think it's being made out to be more than it was. They just were more than anything urging caution and brevity in the survey and simplifying it. It's not like they were coming out against anything or were ordering us to do anything. They were just giving input, which I found to be very helpful because it led me in a mindset towards simplification. So that's again, and that's coming from the most obnoxious, outspoken one of all of us. So that's just how I took it. I didn't see it as anything, and it was short. And in the end, they said, that they thought that that we did a great job with the survey. So it wasn't really like, it wasn't a big deal. They just gave their opinion, which, like I said, I found personally very helpful.
Josh, on the possibility of a consultant, did they basically say hold off on that for how long?
At the very least, until we get survey information in. Yeah, I'll get to the private fundraising part later, but in terms of hiring them, they really wanted to, and I'm glad other people here watched the meeting, because it's not my recollection isn't perfect, but that that hiring someone really should come later, and that they weren't even sure sort of the questions or what we wanted them to tackle. Although I think what Brian laid out is an overview that really any community would want from the very beginning. But yeah, besides that, I can't think of really anything else that they any other feedback they gave. Yeah. So with that said, let me share my screen again. Now, I wanted, Mike, to your point,
Yes.
I feel a little conflicted about it. I definitely see your point. And when they had mentioned last night, or maybe I mentioned it even, the idea of asking about working with Lincolnville Telephone, I do see that as one side, and then municipal broadband as another side. My concern about not asking about working with the potential of working with Lincolnville Telephone is that, okay, we ask people their thoughts on their service provider, who they have, their speed, all of that, but that doesn't give us any information on, okay, you may not like them, but would you still work with them to increase access? And ultimately, I don't know, working with them is a lot easier. Us going around and gathering further information from people about if they would do pre-signups, and then applying for a grant costing the town nothing, and then that grant potentially speeding up LCI's rollout. That doesn't cost us anything, but then obviously municipal fiber is a whole endeavor. And so if we don't ask it on this survey, and we don't actually have any idea if the town would want to work with them, when we report back to the Board of Selectmen, and they say, okay, so should we work with LCI on a preliminary basis for a grant? We'll have to say we don't know.
Well, I feel like that question is very difficult to formulate in a way that isn't leading. I mean, in any direction.
And I think you're right. Yeah.
Because there's so much, and that wasn't, I hope that wasn't aimed at you or the selectmen. It just is, that's almost why it is something better to be left off until this whole thing has progressed to a much further, a step or two further. Because when you're talking about working with, take LCI out of it, just any company to provide a service, is that service going to cost us more in the future? Is it really that much better of a service? And so comparing that to, in the long run, what somebody might save or what it might cost with other options. So how do you ask a question like that?
Well, let me just, make the opposite argument. It does seem to me that a threshold question is, are our fellow Lincolnvillers sufficiently sick of LCI to be willing to consider something else? I think one of the things that's motivated this committee is the almost universal sense that the service is terrible and overly priced. And perhaps as the question going out, if there's a substantial response of people saying, no, I don't want to deal with them anymore, then that's an important piece of information in terms of undergoing the cost of exploring other options. I mean, just as the contrary thought here is it may not necessarily be favorable to LCI to ask that question.
But that's the thing, is that, so I'm seemingly against LCI, but if LCI offered us a higher rate of, say they offered 100 megabits per second at a normal rate, if they could do that, and that we knew over time that as need and demand increased, that they would also increase the service, I would love to be able to go an easy route with them. But my problem is doing all this work just to get to the basic level of service, and that doesn't cover us for the future. You know what I mean? So I would work with LCI if I knew they could give us gigabit service for a reasonable amount, or 100 gig. You know what I mean? 100 megabits. I would love for it to be able to be that easy. I mean, so I'm not, that question to me, yeah, under the right circumstances, I would definitely be willing to work with LCI, but realistically, that's not what they're proposing. They're proposing to get us to that 25 megabits per second level, which is the minimum. So for me, that's why it's so hard to ask that question from every side, because I don't know if that makes sense or not. Because I would, in one case, I wouldn't work with LCI, but the other case I would.
In some ways, I wouldn't try to make the perfect survey. I think it's great we're doing the survey, but I don't think we should assume, it's going to be the fork in the road that tells us where to go. I really don't think it. I think it's going to be useful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, after hearing what we heard tonight, it's really clear to me that this committee, the selectmen, and eventually the town need someone like Brian that has that level of expertise, develops the data, helps us understand the technology and the costs, and then that will lead into some leverage with negotiating with LCI and making good decisions. And so that's the more complex thing. How do we get over into that more sophisticated analysis? But in the meantime, let's take out the question about the municipally owned internet service and maybe decide whether you leave Lincolnville in or out and get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I do think that we should maybe get rid of some of these questions and just ask, because I don't know, I didn't see like the question of just, is the internet, how important is the internet to you? Or is it, you know what I mean? Like those basic questions, because those in themselves answer a lot of our questions. Because if it comes back that not a lot of people in Lincolnville utilize the internet, or that it's not important to them, all these other specific questions, and I'm not saying to get rid of the ones about the internet provider, but does that make sense? Like because I mean, there's a litmus for it, and in the very base of it, if the internet is not important to them, or if they don't utilize it on a daily basis, there's not going to be much traction here.
Yeah. So, okay, this is what I want to do now. I want to go through the survey with all of you, and we just kind of, we're not finalizing it right now, but I just want to kind of get people's sense of it. And the workflow is not at the next select board meeting, but the one after that, to go through the survey with the select board. And if they say, yeah, this is great, green light, then we go with it. So that's a month away.
Okay.
Just so you all know. And then one thing I should add is everyone on the board was pretty enthusiastic about the idea of mailing the survey out to everyone in Lincolnville, which I think is a great idea. And we could first start with the electronic version. I added a question of, are you a resident of Lincolnville? If yes, are you full or part-time? What is your address? And then if we're having people fill it out twice, we'll be able to screen that through the address.
Good.
Any questions? Okay.
No,
so-
no, no.
Okay, so we start with, are you a resident of Lincolnville? Are you full or part-time? What is your address? Who is your current internet provider? Maybe this list is too long. I don't know. I don't know if all these are, I mean, it seems like half of these aren't even in Lincolnville.
Yeah.
And he
Well,
mentioned,
You
Brian
could
mentioned,
just put LCI or other. I mean,
Well, didn't the consultant mention, was it CCI running down Route 1?
he did, yeah, which I didn't, yeah, see.
Yeah, Consolidated. I had spoke to a friend the other day and was kind of surprised to find out that they had their DSL service through Consolidated Communication.
Is that CCI? Is that the?
I think that's
I
what he
would-
said.
Yeah, I would think so.
Consolidate, okay. And maybe because we actually know they're in Lincolnville, I'll bring it up. Okay.
Does US Cellular provide, is that an option here? I mean, I
A
know
friend of mine
Amazon-
has them in Northport,
Okay.
but
I mean,
don't-
I had them for cell phone, but I can't get internet.
okay,
Yeah, I
Um,
think people in Northport do.
okay,
I think the Outdoor Sportsman has US cellular for their computer.
okay. All right, well, so maybe we'll consider paring this down. So what kind of internet service do you have? This is a relative, I updated this somewhat recently, just because obviously their satisfaction with their ISP can be connected to what kind of internet service they have. So
Yeah, sure.
important to have
That's good.
this. What do you currently pay for your internet service?
I think we can get rid of that question. And also, I mean, unless you all think that the length of this is okay, I just felt like I said, if we can concentrate it down, yeah, and like if your actual download speed and upload speed, I don't know the likelihood of being able to, I don't know if those things we can just find out later through the technical part, or I don't know. I don't know if that changes what you guys want to hear on the survey after what we heard from him tonight.
I think the survey is pretty short, though.
Okay.
Like here, let me open it as someone would actually see it. So let's fill it out. Yes, I'm a resident, full-time. I'm just gonna do it for myself. Got fiber optic. I don't know.
And I'm thinking more of in print, because digital, everything's fast. I'm just trying to
Okay.
envision what it would look like. And again, this is not meant to be contentious at all. Contentious.
So could you stop on those two? So the download, upload,
Yeah,
do you think most people responding are going to
No,
Yeah,
that's-
go
20
figure
what,
that out?
20 eggs?
I think this is gonna be 50-50 if people, A, know what we're talking about, and B, if they
Yeah.
fill it out, but
well, that's also what I wanted to say about
I want to put
do
it
you
toward
have
the end.
access to broadband internet? Because I mean, I am on the broadband committee, but not a lot of people understand that broadband and fiber optic are the same thing.
Yeah.
And I just feel like the differentiation, if we said fiber optic, would be easier to understand. I don't know if that.
where do
Well,
I
no.
where do I say that?
So it says one of the questions is, do you have access to broadband internet but choose not to subscribe to it?
Oh, okay.
And I just meant in the in the nomenclature altogether, if there was a way we could simplify that so that there's a clear differentiation between the two services.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think,
Saying fiber optic.
yeah, I would agree. I think I looked up broadband, and broadband is defined to include DSL, depending upon,
Oh,
how
I
many,
didn't know that.
how
Okay.
much volume it can carry. So I think really talking about fiber optic versus DSL is more useful. I would agree.
Okay, yeah, let's make that change. I mean, especially because we know in Lincolnville, well, I guess with the exception of Route 1, perhaps, but in Lincolnville, broadband is fiber optic.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to change it.
And DSL is dial-up.
Yeah. Okay, let me go back here.
The broadband committee.
And,
Broadband-
you know,
that
people
three-
can also just skip a
I think I'm
question.
muted.
Yeah, you're right.
Broadband committee. That's all right. Sure.
Are you
satisfied
satisfied?
I'm gonna unmute myself here.
Can we add the question, is internet service important to you?
I think that's a good question. Yeah, I think there's value in that. I'm not sure where to add it. Let's
I
see.
think you get down to where you say, do you use it for work? That'd be the place to put that other question. So do you use it?
Or even maybe after what's your address, just right at the beginning, because it's like, a good segue into everything. I mean, it's asking about the internet, so you might as well find out right off the bat, is this stuff even important?
Yeah. All right, let me see how this, here we go. How about high speed internet
Or just internet, because I don't, there are still some people who really don't use the internet at all.
okay. That makes
Well,
sense.
Yeah.
Is access to the internet?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
probably,
yeah.
rather than making it an abstract.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
And then they can write their own if they want. Let me bring it up.
Bless your proficiency, Josh.
Thank you.
I'm impressed.
I just love that we can do this.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Okay, so is access to the internet important to you? Yes, no, other. We went over these. Download, upload. Are you satisfied with the internet? If no, why not?
Do we want, just a question, Josh, when we talk about the speeds, do we want to somehow, say what the units are? Do we assume that is 20 megs or 20 gigs? I mean, obviously there's a huge difference,
Yeah.
but I think the average schlub like myself would say, how many gigs am I getting? I don't know. I just signed up for it. So at least maybe saying what the units are would be helpful.
Okay, I'll think about try to think about a way to add that.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Yeah, you might consider using an example. A music file takes so many megs to download properly, etc. I don't know if that would work. Or a Skype conversation, or whatever number is sufficient for a Skype conversation. You just use examples to indicate.
I would just direct them to use a standard metric of megabits so that we know what we're dealing with, and that's what we want to receive the answer back in.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think it's easiest. I would agree.
You could say blank megabits. Yeah.
That's Mbps, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Mbps. Oh, here, let me. Okay, I'll figure out how to do that. I'll do it so they can just write a number. Mbps. Okay, I'll add this stuff later. I don't have to waste your time. Okay, are you satisfied with the internet you have in your home? These felt like the most basic questions or basic responses to add, and then there's still other. I didn't want to have a million options.
Makes sense.
I like 'em.
And most of this came directly from that other survey.
Yeah.
Again, it's a balance between giving them the options that probably are most common, and they can always add their own. Now, let's talk about this one. How much would you be willing to spend a month for faster internet service? George had a concern, and I agreed that if we were mentioning municipal broadband, but then we also had this question, how do you accurately ask this? And I think now that we've taken out the municipal broadband question, I think this is this question on its own is fine.
I agree. I think that my concern was having the question about the municipal broadband without talking about cost beyond the monthly fees.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I would agree, Josh.
Okay.
So I just had a question. Could you go back to the question that asked you, do you have a student
Yeah.
who uses? I'm just wondering if there should be any type of follow-up question about whether the internet service meets the educational needs, or something more that follows up on that to see if that works.
Well, we've got the next question and then the general, because the next question, asked about the negative impact.
I guess they
and
tie in. Yeah.
Yeah, online
Yeah.
education.
Sorry, I didn't mean that to be negative, but it's just,
Yeah, that's
so
fine.
it's not superfluous.
Yeah. Okay. And then we just have two more things. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions for expanding fiber optic access? And do you have any general comments?
Do you find those to be redundant at all? Do you think we could get rid of one of those, or do you think both of them are important?
Well, so this one, do you have any recommendations or suggestions? That was an idea from the board. I don't know. I feel like having I think they're different questions, and having the more open-ended one, I think they're both important, is what I'm trying to say.
I do too. It's a little duplicative there. I would say, do you have any suggestions for expanding? You don't have to say recommendations or pick,
Okay.
pick one of the.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly show you guys now. This is what it looks like if you're filling it out.
Yeah, digitally, I think it's the perfect size.
Okay.
It's just paper. I wonder. I mean, I think all the questions are great.
And I don't, thank you. And I don't really know what I would imagine the response rate from paper surveys is really low, like pathetically low.
Well, if people can be primed, I was talking with a couple people about this, especially if we do the every door delivery, because my wife works for the post office. It is a much cheaper way to do the mailing.
Yeah.
And it also saturates the town. But if we can somehow, before the survey gets out, let people know, so that, because I know how I am, if I get a piece of paper that I'm not really expecting, it's probably going to go in the trash.
Mhm.
But if people know that there are surveys going out, maybe they can keep an eye, you know what I mean? Like just kind of informally spread the word, or through whatever channels, because I feel like that's when people knows that there's a question coming through, and their opinions being sought, that they're more likely to give it, rather than just randomly seeing something that looks like a flyer.
Josh, we're not just going to send it out, right? It'll also be available online, I assume.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I think that we should push it out online first, and obviously blanket the airways that here's the link. Please fill it out. We're also sending it, and that was a suggestion from the board to send it out to the every door delivery.
Right.
Because
and
the
then
cost.
the written piece could direct them back to the online piece, so they don't have to go mail it back and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's true. It could have a link. That's a good idea. Okay, any other questions about the survey?
Nice work.
No, it looks great.
Okay,
Good
great.
job.
All right, so moving on, let's talk about George's ordinance review. I'm going to bring that up. See, one moment.
It was drier than burnt toast.
I think you should take that as a
Absolutely.
compliment.
Thought I was back in Germany studying for my master's. That was like studying law.
Okay. And I
Yeah,
highlighted this and
great.
I forget how to unhighlight it, so please excuse that. George, do you want to?
Sure. Let me be brief. What I did basically was to go through and read all the town ordinances and then go back and read the underlying state law for the cable TV ordinance. It was fascinating to go through all the town ordinances, especially as a newcomer. I think that the basic conclusion of this is that there essentially are just procedural elements that have to be complied with in terms of public hearings and approvals, in terms of making any significant change in the cable television franchising agreements or entering into new ones. So I think that, if we proceed simply with having a public hearing on this and having the Board of Selectmen giving their approval, at least in the initial stages, there are no obstacles. You never feel fully confident that you haven't missed something. And I really just relied upon the information that was made publicly available in terms of what the ordinances are. There wasn't anything that specified anything beyond the process. I did find it kind of curious that our enabling statute here in Lincolnville is now based on a superseded state statute. I don't think that probably makes a difference. I suspect we were just grandfathered in. The other element that I thought would be helpful to take a look at some point would be to look at our current franchise agreement with Lincolnville Television to see what's in there. Because if you look at the underlying state statute, it provides for both exclusive and non-exclusive franchises. I'm assuming that the one we have right now is non-exclusive, but someone should probably take a look at that at some point. I'm not sure there's much else that I can put forward other than I didn't find anything besides these two sections.
Okay, great. Do we have any questions for George?
No, I think that's great, except do people feel as if we as a committee should look into to see if there's an agreement like you mentioned, George?
I don't think there is. I think it's just between individual subscribers and LCI. I mean, because there's no, I think we would know if we were partnered with them or had some sort of a contract, because that would come up either in budget or, in some other way, unless I'm misspeaking.
I think we have a non-exclusive franchise agreement with them that generates basically zero income. I really don't, this came up maybe a year ago. I'm pretty rusty on it.
So let's find out what the answer is.
Yeah,
Let's ask David Kinney, find out.
yeah, I can take that on.
It's at least to avoid embarrassment going
Sure.
down the line if there's something in there that we don't know.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Okay.
Great, sounds good. Thank you, George.
My pleasure.
Okay, so moving along to discussion about private fundraising for the Island Institute matching funds. I had asked the Board of Selectmen what they thought about the committee finding private funds to pay for the matching part of the Island Institute grant, and what would they think if we just basically handed over $7,500 with a little note that said, please use this as a matching, the match. And they thought that was very problematic.
Yes.
It also almost feels like a way to kind of do an end run around what the community wants, I guess. Brian made the point that there should be buy-in from the community. And if a handful of individuals just front the money and the select board says, thank you, and takes it, I think that at least in the eyes of like the Island Institute, that doesn't really show necessarily buy-in from the community. Compared to the Board of Selectmen making the decision as the representatives of the town to expend that money or having a special town meeting. to raise those funds, if that makes sense.
I mean, right now, if we wanted to get money from the town, we're waiting until, this time next year. Did the selectmen talk at all about being open to, I guess we'd have to have a special town meeting if they couldn't find the money within their budget, which last time you indicated you didn't think there was. If we're trying to get, a contribution towards the 15,000, $7,500, can we find that without a town meeting, or do we have to wait a year, or do we have to get a special town meeting?
I think a special town meeting would, if we wanted to get this done before next year, which of course we would, a special town meeting would be the avenue.
Did they talk about that at all, or indicate any willingness to consider that, or did it just not come up?
It just didn't come up. But I do think that, with a strong survey response, that's the next question, I would think, to ask the board to consider a special town meeting to raise those funds. I mean, you've got two people here that will probably be elected next month, and I'm for that. So I think, and $7,500, as Brian was saying, in the grand scheme of things, is really not a huge sum of money when it comes to planning.
Yeah, and just to give you that, like, in perspective, they wanted to spend almost $17,000 on resurfacing the tennis courts this year. So $7,500 for looking into something like the town having internet, I think, is a paltry amount.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, well, if there's nothing else on that, let's move on to action items. So I will find out about the franchise agreement with LCI. Are there any other action items before our next meeting?
I had a question about mailing out those flyers. Are the town workers going to do that, or are we going to do that?
That'll be directly through the post office. So they'll do that. What's it called? Every door.
It's like ED,
Oh, we gotta put it in
something,
envelopes.
every door delivery, where they just give them big stacks of it to every postal delivery person, so that they don't have to sort it. They just deliver it at every mailbox that they deliver mail to. It's much easier, and I think it's less than half of what a normal first class mailing is. So.
Okay,
Well,
so Gina,
I guess I mean printing it and putting it in envelopes and that part of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would imagine, so printing it, that the town office would do it. I would certainly volunteer myself to help with the folding and putting it into envelopes. I wouldn't want to just put that on the town staff.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to, I'd volunteer
Yeah,
on
I'd
those lines too.
Okay, great. So yeah, we could find a way to do that while social distancing. I think we can make that happen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And let them
Licking stamps.
quarantine, for a day or two.
I'd like to volunteer Mike for that as well.
Well, thank you.
Okay, great. Let's see. So because the board isn't, we're going to have a very basic meeting in 2 weeks. From now until the next select board meeting, I'm not sure when we should meet again. What other work we can do before that select board meeting where they approve the survey.
Yeah, we should wait till after
Yeah,
that meeting.
Yeah. Well, I agree. There's not a lot to do, but I suggest one thing we might want to think about is how we're going to publicize and market and advertise the survey that's coming out. That is, create a list of stores we're going to have pamphlets at saying, "Oh yeah, survey is coming out." Write a press release to Penn Bay Pilot or local newspapers, etc. Things like that. So if we have that ready, then we can kind of hit the ground and get the thing out as soon as it's approved.
That could be really the focus of our next meeting. So if the selectmen approve what Josh presents, then we meet and do what Mike's talking about and really figure out how to market this thing. That'd be a really good focus for our next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if each of us were to just in between now and the next meeting, just think about ways that we might get the word out
That sounds
it would
great.
help, yeah.
That sounds great, Mike. Okay, so I'm just looking at the calendar.
So that'd be after the 14th of next month?
So the select board meeting on July 13th is just going to be the payroll and treasurer warrants. So we're not going to be discussing any other business at that meeting. So it's the July 27th meeting where
Wow.
the board will discuss the survey. So it's in a
So
month.
we're into August.
Yeah, we are.
Thanks.
So how about we meet July 30th at 7?
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
Let me write that down. We get a little break.
Great.
Okay. And we'll have a whole new select board. So very exciting.
there we go.
Okay, great. Well, any non-agenda items?
I can't think any.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
So move. Second,
Okay, motion is moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, Mike, how do you vote?
yes.
George, how do you vote?
Yes.
Gina, how do you vote?
Yes.
David, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jordan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jonathan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Right. And I vote yes. So this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Take
Good
care,
night,
guys.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.